If you guys have followed me for a while, you will know that I did a applying to 8 film schools in Europe video about 4 years ago when I was picking where to go for uni, and I ended up choosing Metfilm school. Off the back of that video, there was a lot of questions about what it was like, or whether it was worth it, or if I would recommend it, and I got a lot of DMs about it, and I thought I might as well just compile all the information that I think is useful to know to everyone that was in the same position as me 4 years ago. Picking a uni, especially when you live abroad, and knowing if it's the right decision for the next years of your life is really difficult, and unis do not make it easy for you to find out if it's the right place for you, because obviously they need to market themselves, so they're going to put their best foot forward anyway. I want to clarify that this is my experience only, and I'm extremely grateful and privileged that I was even able to go to a film school, and I really don't want that to come across like that's not the case in this video. I just also think that it's important that film schools and universities in general take accountability for the student experience, and I think we have that voice and that opportunity to share it. So yeah, thank you if you've been keeping in check with this channel, which is very on and off. I'm very sorry, and I hope this helps someone. I've split this up into like the categories that I think are good to talk about or that I would have wanted to know. Obviously, I'm only going to be able to cover so much in one video. So first I'm going to talk about the application process, then the location, campus and facilities, term breaks, staff, student life, modules/education, work opportunities or like exchange opportunities, equipment, and the price, because I feel like that's what everybody thinks about. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And so on. I would like to clarify that they changed the syllabus of my specific course, which was the BA 3-year practical filmmaking course, which means that everything that I say might not be 100% the case anymore, and if you apply, yours might be different. Okay, let's begin. I think there are 3 things that you really need to know when you apply to Met. They let everybody in, and if they don't let everybody in, they make it seem like they let everybody in. With that said, I do think it's good that there are schools that let everybody in, because that gives everybody the opportunity and the access to learn this craft and put themselves out there. But if you're someone with a lot of experience and you have a show reel and you have a few film festival wins and you have your own camera and maybe your own contacts in London, I don't know if you're going to enjoy that aspect of being in a class where a lot of people maybe have never touched a camera, don't know what a screenplay is, etc, etc. I was pretty, at my beginning stages, like I was very much someone that probably didn't have a very big portfolio, so for me that was beneficial, but I can very much see how for other people it wasn't. Second is they're going to oblige you to take, and if this is not the case anymore, then I'm really happy for you guys, but they obliged us to take an, I think it's called an, sorry, I'm looking at my laptop, an IELTS, like an IELTS test, which is basically an English comprehension and writing test. When I tell you, this was so incredibly frustrating. I have done, like, if you guys saw my other YouTube videos, I did the IB, and I was in an English speaking school since I was 4 years old. I literally speak English better than all of my native languages, and they still wouldn't like allow me to go into this uni without this test. And that for me required me to take a 300-pound train to another part of the country just to do this test, and then pay 300 pounds for the test, for a test I didn't even need. And that was extremely infuriating, especially because the visas are expensive, accommodation is expensive, the school is expensive. I went back and forth with them for about 5 weeks about how I could get around, like how I could find another way, or like an internal exam, blah blah blah. They kept saying no until they finally budged. I don't know what changed, and they set me up with an IELTS examiner from the school, and we just did it on Zoom, and he literally told me like in within 10 minutes that I had passed, and then I, you know, was very fluent in English. Surprise! It took so long to get that English exam approved, in terms of like not having to do the exam, that I then missed like the time frame I needed for my visa. So I had to get a speed visa. It's a lot more expensive to get a speed visa versus like the normal time frame, but because I had uni in 2 weeks, I couldn't do the normal time frame because I wouldn't have been able to go. Anyway, that could have all been avoided if they just gave me the internal exam from the beginning, and I spoke to friends of mine that I met after, and they got offered the internal exam right at the start of their application process. So that was really frustrating for me to hear, brand new going into a uni, that was how things were managed. And on top of that, I was then in class with a lot of people that didn't actually speak English. We had someone that we actually would translate the teacher's lectures for in class because they didn't understand. And look, I am no one to say that you need to be fluent in English to be going to uni, and I really don't mind helping people if that were the case. What I think is really frustrating is the double standard that there needs to be a certain level of like serious dedication to English level at your application process, and then when you're in class you're translating to other people. That just doesn't fully add up to me, how the application process is coherent across all the students. And this is what brought me to my conclusion that they let everyone in, because it felt a bit more like they were focused on the amount of people that were coming to the school rather than the criteria that everybody was setting. And then thirdly, there will be a few things that they advertise in the application process that you don't actually get that much, or you don't get as you might have thought you would. And I think I'll get into this a bit more later, but that's just something to be aware of. So the film school is located in Ealing, and Ealing is in West London. It's like right after Hammersmith. I personally think it is very well connected. It's definitely not the easiest if you want to go to more specific places, like if you're trying to go to southeast or northwest or northeast, just places that are like more in the diagonals. It's not as easy. But actually getting from Ealing into the center of the city, there's a lot of tube links. There's the Lizzie line, which is super fast. There's so many buses. I really had no problem living there, and I honestly thought it was really green. It had a lot of friendly cafes, it had a lot of pubs, there were so many students there. So I had a good time there. I will admit, like, it is still far out. If you're looking to be like walking past Big Ben every day, like that's not an Ealing. That's not gonna happen. But if you're looking to have like a town where all your friends kind of accumulate and you have that London feeling not too far away, then it's a great option. I never felt like I was really at risk, and I always was able to get home really easily. Also, it depends on what you pick for your housing, but Ealing is cool. Ealing is vibes. I had my era there. I probably wouldn't live there again, but that's because I was there for so long. But yeah. Then this is kind of like location / accommodation. I personally did not go into student accommodation because I had spoken to someone that went to Met, which is why I'm making this video, because I think it's so important to be able to speak to people that go to the uni. I spoke to someone and they said, whatever you do, don't go to student accommodation, because it's extremely expensive for the actual land value. It's very small, and there was a lot of like maintenance issues, meaning that they were paying a lot and then having problems, which is obviously not ideal. The only benefit, or one of the main benefits of that, is you're right by the uni. It's like literally a 2-minute walk, and you meet a lot of people. So if that is worth it for you, then go for it, because a lot of my friends did it and it was super important for them and they loved it. Personally, I, coming from abroad, didn't want to have any concerns about overpaying an accommodation that was then not worth it for me. So I got a flat in the same town, still in Ealing, with other Metfilm school people that I'd met on Spare Room, and it taught me to be more independent. It taught me to do things that were maybe more out of my comfort zone. So I'm glad I did that, and that was the right choice for me. But that doesn't mean that it was that it's like the right choice for everyone, obviously. So yeah, that's the thing with location and student accommodation. I think it kind of depends on which accommodation you go to, but I hope that's insightful. Moving on to campus and facilities. So I think a really big kind of umbrella of the Metfilm questions is the Ealing Studios right next door to the campus. I'm gonna be completely blunt here. I never went into the Ealing Studios except for on one project that I got on by coincidence that wasn't even related to the uni, in my entire 3 years at Metfilm. I don't know if that was because there was just a kind of a change in the runnings of the school that they stopped using the space, or if it was my course or my teachers or whatever. But I was never there. We never got any liaison. There was never any educational spaces used there. and for about half of my degree, Ealing Studios was also under construction. So to be honest, that for me was a pretty big letdown, because you see this online like, wow, next to a film studio is really famous, like Doctor Strange was filmed there, amazing premises, amazing location, and it kind of gets thrown in your face and taken away, like you're never gonna touch it. And that sucked. That was quite frustrating. I do understand that the construction plans has nothing to do with like our uni's fault, but I've also spoken to people where there was no construction and they still didn't have that use of the studios, which is a real shame. I can also imagine that Ealing Studios isn't the easiest to collaborate with because they're probably way more important and they don't care about uni students, but I still think there's potential there that that we missed out on. I hope that's changing. I hope that with the new studios that have now been built that there will be more overlap. This is what I was saying earlier. So definitely a selling point that was not proven to be very true. So as I said, the campus is next to Ealing Studios, and then you have like this long kind of row of buildings. So there's a block A, B, C, and D. However, in the middle of those blocks, there's like 2 random offices of costume stylists or I don't know, whatever corporate thing there was. But you basically had to walk in between like this really long building, but our uni was only at the 2 ends of it, which to me is like an architectural nightmare, because how do you build such a big institution on like a split building? I don't know. Again, these are things that I'm sure there's more logical answers to, but as a student you have like a very one POV of why that is a certain way. But that was frustrating because when you're doing castings, no one can find the right building because it's so confusing. The entrance is gate locked, so you need to find the right entrance to even get to the gate because there's 2 entrances on the map. Yeah, anyway, it's quite confusing. But that aside, when you actually get to know the place, they have a nice cafe, they do like sandwiches, snacks, it's called the Grindhouse, I think. And then there's a learning space, which is like a library, which has a lot of cute working spaces. And those areas are really nice and I use them a lot. However, they are not nearly enough space for the amount of students that the school has. When everyone is in, when the 2-year BAs and the 3-year BAs and all the MAs, which are across all the disciplines are in, then they have a 6-month filmmaking course, and they have like a, I don't know, those short course things that they have for summer schools, and then they have a tour of like the school. When all those people are in, like actually, no, it was so overstimulating, like you just feel like you're in a concert for Rihanna or something, and the space is not calculated for that. The only outside space that you have to hang out in at the school is the smoking area, and personally I don't smoke, so I don't really want to chill in a patio with smoke being puffed in my face every single day. So that's like, for me, kind of a big thing is when you're trying to make friends and meet people, you need spaces where people can accumulate naturally. The classrooms themselves, they're very simple, like white wall, classic rooms. I won't lie, they're definitely not, like, it doesn't feel like a film school in the sense of crazy studios, big sets, like it doesn't have that at all. Their logic is more like, let's have really empty plain rooms so that they can be used for a lot of purposes, which I 100% understand, but I wish there would have been a balance of both. I think there's 6 edit suites, I'm not sure. The edit suites get used a lot. They also have a really cute screening room on the top floor, which I love. But they have a sound suite and we never got taught to use it, and I know I probably should have tried harder to try to use it, but I felt like surely that would be in my sound module in my 3 years of uni. We would go to a sound studio. I thought that was, I mean, maybe that was a bad assumption to make, but that was kind of frustrating because it was just sitting there not being used. Anyway, okay, I feel like that's a good roundup of the campus and the facilities. It's about a, oh yeah, and it's about a 10-minute walk. The campus is a 10-minute walk from the station. You can go to South Ealing or you can go to Ealing Broadway. You can get buses to White City. Yeah, and you're right by the Ealing Broadway Mall, which has basically everything. I just wanted to put this in because I think it's important as an international student to talk about. The term breaks. The term breaks are basically the like holidays that you get in between your degree. So in my degree, we got a break. We got 3 weeks from December to January for Christmas, which I think was a good amount. And then we got a summer break from April to September. And that, guys, my goodness, like honestly, looking back, I loved it in the moment because I went backpacking, I went to see my family, I, you know, did my own stuff. But in hindsight, that was just such a long period of time where my life was kind of like unstructured, and that's a me problem. That's not a Met problem. That's a me problem. So I think if you're going to do the 3-year, you really need to either plan your holidays like in a productive way, or if you're happy like doing super chill holidays for half a year, then honestly slay. But what I think I should have done and learned maybe more about was working in my holidays, because that would have been such a big time chunk where I could network and meet new people and try and get on set before graduating, so that when I graduated the transition would be as smooth as possible. So those breaks are very bittersweet depending on what you need. And I personally think it would have been better if the uni split them up a little more, so that you had maybe like a month here, and 2 weeks there, instead of 3 weeks and then 3 months. Like that was for me, that was too much. But the 2-year course, on the other hand, has very little breaks and it's very full on. And if you're ready to just go for it and go and work right away, then that's probably the best choice for you. Honestly, it depends on where you are at in your career or your age or your passion. And that probably will help you inform that decision better. Okay, this is a big topic as well that I think a lot of people had a lot of questions about. Student life at a film school, just by definition, is going to be very different than the student life at any like more generic university. The reason being that a film school is very like focused and centralized on one type of education, so they don't have that kind of massive infrastructure, huge database, lots of sport teams, a big campus, big budgets, professors from all around the world. Like it just doesn't work like that, because they're focusing on one thing, and so they're very niche. I do think that Met does make an effort to nurture a bit of student life, and like they did a few mixers, they did a few like pub nights where they'd get us like free drinks and stuff. But I think overall, because they are a part of UWL, well, they were a part of UWL at my time. They are now no longer going to be a part of UWL. Because they were a part of UWL, we were allowed to use those like student life experiences. So I was on the football team and I had friends across other societies there, and you can go and take part in their experiences. But it's not the same, because it's not your uni and you don't see them in the hallways day to day. You only see them when you go to the social things. So I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for. I'm glad I was able to play football and meet a few people outside of my school, but I really wish that my school had had a bigger social community, because in film, like, I don't even know how to explain this, but networking is literally everything. So if I had met half the people that went to my uni, I would already have had a much bigger network than what I did coming out of uni. And I don't think that they have enough social traditions or like uni events. Like in my first year, I felt like we had a lot more events, and then they kind of died down, but that could have also been me. I really don't know. So yeah, the student life is definitely something that you have to figure out what's the priority for you. If you're going to uni and you think you like film, but you're actually going to uni to go to uni, then go to a normal one, because the student life will not be the same. A lot of the student life is what you put into it. You have to make plans with your friends, you have to put yourself out there, plan nights out with your like class. That's like the best thing I can advise for you to have a good time. Don't rely on it to happen from the uni, because it's probably not going to happen. So the MA is different. The MA is like split into different disciplines. And there's other courses that are also specified, but the BA is everything. So you do screenwriting, you do cinematography, you do editing, you do production, and you do sound. And that means that you get to get an insight into everything and you learn a bit about everything, but you're not going into depth of anything until your electives, which comes in your 3rd year. The electives are great because you get to just focus on one craft. People that want to be like writer directors can do writing and directing. People that want to do cinematography and editing can do that. So that's really great, and it really gives you a lot of knowledge on set, because I'm much more aware of what everyone else's role is, because I've also learned about their role. So I think that's great, and I think that should never change, because I think a filmmaker that has a more holistic understanding of the set is going to be a better filmmaker. So I think that's great that they do that. I also feel like the teacher completely makes or breaks your class. So that leads me on to my next topic, which is the staff. The staff is literally like going to make or break your experience. If you have a good teacher in a subject, you will love that subject, even if you didn't like the subject before. If you have a bad teacher in that subject, even if you love that subject, you will hate it. You will absolutely hate it, because it completely affects how you learn and how you receive feedback, or whether you're brave to get up in front of the class and present your ideas. There are some absolutely incredible teachers at Met that like I love with my whole heart, and inspired me to make films and made me want to keep going. Like absolutely, I hope they know who they are, because they exist. There are also teachers that are industry professionals and are very knowledgeable and good at their job, but I don't know if they understand the more pedagogical, what's the word I'm trying to say? Pedagogic? The word used to teach. I think that they might come from a very professional background, and that doesn't necessarily transmit to teaching. So when you have a teacher that is kind of just like, oh, this is how it goes, I don't think it will create a very positive class environment. With that said, it's very hit or miss. Sometimes you can have a great teacher, sometimes you won't, and that's just something you need to be aware of. And you need to be aware that you need to put in the work to get what you want out of a class, because in case you get a teacher you don't like, you don't want to spoil all that time and all that learning. And that's unfortunately just the reality of it. I don't think that's necessarily a Metfilm thing. I think that probably happens in a lot of schools, but in this one in particular, because it's like an industry based learning, it definitely transforms it. With the staff, there was also a bit of constant change. So we had a lot of like course leaders changing, level leaders changing, then they would be on annual leave, then they would come back, then it would have like our biggest hand in, they would be away, then they would change. So there was a lot of like changing of leadership. I don't think I need to explain what changing leadership can mean in the behind the scenes of an institution, but as you might imagine, it's not exactly the best result for the students that are involved, because they're constantly unaware of who they can approach to for certain issues. They get led to different people, they get different answers, it's confusing, the authority is just like a little all over the place. So the constant changing of staff was definitely a little bit stressful to manage. I was naive, maybe this wasn't naive, but I thought that if I went to Met, which has a school in Leeds and has a school in London and has a school in Berlin and now also has a school in Brighton and I think somewhere else that I don't know, I assumed that there would obviously be an exchange program between their campuses where you could go in different modules and be in a different part of the country or in a different country and do the same learning with new people. I thought that was like, obviously we're going to take advantage of the fact they have the exact same campus everywhere and, you know, move people around. I was wrong, unfortunately. There were no exchanges of that sort. There was an exchange where like a group of students was selected to go to the Metfilm School Berlin campus, but it wasn't because of uni, and it wasn't that they were in uni and having the student life and living there. They just went for a few days to get to know it, which I think is great, good to like liaise the schools, but I feel like we could have done so much more than that. And I would have been like, I could have moved to Berlin for a month, integrated myself into the class, which is the exact same module I have anyway, and just widened our networking, which is why I think this is so important for Met to change, is that they have so many people that want to do film, but half the people will never meet, and that is so important. There's an incredible Creative Futures employee that is in this role now, and he basically manages like the improvements of kind of getting work opportunities for graduates, getting work opportunities for students, summer break internships, and he does that. But that happened about halfway through my time at Met. So one person to pick up that role for the entire school was not going to solve that underlying kind of lack of connections for the students. So I really appreciate him, and I think he's doing such an awesome job, and I hope that over time his team will get bigger and better for the uni. But during my time there was not enough connecting the students with out of school, you know, professional opportunities to actually step out and get their foot in the door. I'm not saying that every film school is meant to do that, and I understand that in film you have to make those opportunities for yourself, but I do feel like the uni advertises a lot of contacts and a lot of work, you know, opportunities at the beginning of your application process that you don't really see later on. I think that the equipment at Metfilm was pretty good. I'm not super techie, but based on what I know, we had pretty industry relevant set materials. Every set that I've been on now since graduating, I have seen very similar equipment to what I also had at uni, and these are people that are working professionals using this like equipment, so I do think that we had a good ground learning of that equipment. When you do your graduation project, you get the opportunity to shoot on an Alexa Mini, which is a very industry standard camera, so I definitely do think that was worth it. You also get to make passion projects, so you can make a like request for equipment outside of your school time and do your own projects. Personally, I never did that because it was such a paperwork headache and I'm a little bit lazy, but I probably should have. There's also a lot of lighting. I think the sound equipment is maybe a little bit outdated. You also get access to garden studios, so there is a lot of real like film feeling in the equipment that they give you and that equipment that is available to you. Unfortunately, the relationship between the kit room staff and the student like community is a little hostile. I'm not sure how that happened. I don't know if it has always been this way or if it was just with us, but there's a lot of friction between the kit room and the student community. It's just like a thing. I think they think it's our fault and the students thought it was their fault, and there's like, it's a little high school. I don't really know what that's about. The kit, I would say, is probably one of the things that makes the uni worth it for me, because I would have never been able to film on an Alexa Mini without being at uni for free. Like, obviously I paid for the uni, so that's where the cost goes. But I do think that the equipment that you get to learn with and practice with makes the high price point maybe more worthwhile. Okay, the big question. I think this is a really difficult question to answer because there's going to be different opinions on what makes it worth it for different people. My number one thing I would advise anyone that's considering going to the school is thinking about how much is the money that you spend going to the school going to set you back in your financial situation. If you're someone who, you know, has been working their whole life and saving for uni, and this uni is like your kind of long-term like career goal, and like all that money is really kind of banking on this experience, I probably wouldn't spend that on film school, because I think there's a lot of cheaper ways to get into the industry or get your work seen without setting you back so financially. However, if you have parents that support you, or you have maybe more flexibility in your funding, or you're able to get loans or things like that, and the financial burden of going to uni isn't going to set you back that much, then I would say you should go, because you have a safe environment and you can meet a lot of people and not have the pressure of going in like head on. With that said, you do get budgets with the different courses, like the modules that you do. So at the beginning of the year you get a brand new laptop, which is worth £2,000. Then you get £300 for your first short film project, and you get £200 for your first documentary project, and you get £3,000 for your series module, which is like a TV series that you do with your grade, and then you get £15,000 for your feature. However, this money sounds maybe like big in numbers, or like, oh wow, that's actually kind of good, and it is, and it really is good that they give budgets for these projects. However, that money is only going to translate as worthy to you if you're doing a role in that project that matters to you. If you're on a £30,000 series and you're a spark, it might not feel like that was worth £3,000 of your tuition, if that makes sense. Whereas if you're the director or the writer and this is like a really good showreel material for you, then that would be very much worth it. Same thing with the $15,000 for the long form. That's a lot of money, but it's also for a crew of 30 people, so it's actually gonna drown itself out super fast. But if you're the director of that project, that will help you to get an amazing credit, or a potentially amazing credit, without having to spend that money yourself. So I think it's very hit or miss on what you make out of every project. And as well, it's also important to remember that that money is for the whole team, and it's not like going to one person to choose what they want to do. Also, unfortunately, the long form module does not exist anymore. We were the last cohort to do a feature film as part of uni, and I'm so freaking grateful that we did that, because that was such a huge learning experience for all of us. So I'm really sorry for the new people that don't get that experience. For the prices, I would check the website, because they change all the time, and I don't know what it was when I first started versus now, and see if that is worth it to you. Because if you end up going to the uni for 3 years and coming out of it without the funds to maybe sustain life in London, which is where you want to be working, that transition of making money and sustaining your living is going to be very difficult. And I think there's a lot of amazing ways to get into the film industry, which I wish I would have learned at uni, but I learned them after, that you can get your foot in the door without necessarily breaking the bank as much. But yeah, again, I just want to reiterate that this is my experience and these are just like summaries and hot takes. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is how it's going to be for you. I hope this was helpful. I really hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you guys have questions below. If you want to see more part 2, more specific like details of everything. Honestly, I could talk about my film school forever. Like, it was such a big part of my life. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry that my uploading is very sporadic and I'm not very consistent, but I do really still love my little YouTube community, and as I kind of explore my filmmaking journey, it's really nice to see like the steps on the way that I've been going. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day. Good luck with your applications if you are applying, and yeah, I hope to see you very, very soon. Bye bye.